He told me I could work under my brother and handle the finances only, since that was my forte. But I wasn't okay with working for my brother, especially when I had been working so damn hard to prove myself worthy of being the boss for 4 whole years, even before my dad married my stepmom and my stepbrother came into our lives. My stepbrother only had the knowledge he'd gained from college. He had no idea what hands-on experience of running a business was like, unlike me. I tried to explain that to my dad, but he just wasn't ready to listen. And after a few days of arguing, my dad told me his decision was final, and if I wasn't happy with it, then I could pack my things up and leave. So that's exactly what I did. I stayed at a friend's house for a few days after that until I got a job. Once I received my first paycheck, I rented an apartment with 2 other people and worked my way up from there. I still remember very distinctly that my first room was a pale blue, which really helped calm my nerves whenever I'd come back from work, frazzled, exhausted, and still hurt over my dad's betrayal. I think that's why I chose to paint my current house's walls the same shade of blue. I now live in a nice little house in the suburbs with a picket fence and my dog, Aussie. I'm a financial consultant at a huge company and lead a lonely but comfortable life. I didn't ever speak to my dad or anyone else from my family after I left, and I've only kept in touch with a handful of my friends. I've had to work really hard, and in the process, I lost touch with a lot of people. But I'm okay with that because that just meant fewer people to remind me of the past. My dad's house is just a 3-hour drive away from where I live now, but to get where I am now took me 8 whole years, so I'm kind of proud of myself for achieving this since I was all on my own and didn't have anyone looking over me. I've never felt the need to speak to my dad again or even forgive him because it's been so long that it just doesn't matter anymore. And I used to think that he had forgotten about me entirely as well, but that changed around 2 days back when my dad showed up at my house out of the blue. It was the weekend, and I was home. I was really shocked to see him here and to see the change that 8 years had brought in how he looked. He was a shadow of the man that he used to be almost a decade ago because now his hair was grayed and had thinned considerably, and he was also a lot more bony and skinnier than I remembered. He told me that he'd asked around for my address, and one of my friends from the past, the one who'd let me stay at his place when I got kicked out, had told him where to find me a few days ago when my dad had told him he wanted to end the feud and reconcile with me. I felt bad for him, so I invited him in. He told me that my stepbrother had been the one to drive him here and was waiting in the car. So, I invited him inside as well, even though I really didn't want to speak to him, but it's common courtesy. My stepbrother also looked worn out and tired, and it was obvious that they had been through some hard times, judging by their battered car and faded old clothes. Initially, I thought they were actually here to reconcile and that my dad would ask me to forgive him, but after some small talk, when they came to the point, they blindsided me by saying that they wanted me to rejoin the business, or else they'd go bankrupt and were in desperate need of my help. They wanted me to take over once more and save their failing business, which had been declining for the past couple of years. They had even had to take out a loan and mortgage my mother's jewelry, which she'd left to my dad, to fund themselves so they wouldn't go out of business. My dad said they'd both tried their best, but it just wasn't working anymore, and they were really close to going completely bankrupt if I didn't step in to help them. Even my stepbrother, who still seemed just as arrogant as he used to be, said that they needed my help and wanted me to take over to save them. So they wanted me to get involved after almost a decade, only because they wanted me to prevent their ship from sinking. There was no apology either, and they approached me like they were here for a business meeting and not like they owed me an apology for kicking me out when both of them knew very well that I was the rightful heir to my dad's business. I was meeting them after 8 whole years, and they were totally businesslike in their demeanor, which was fine, but they definitely owed me an apology at the very least. So I decided to treat them like I would treat any other businessman who came to me for help. I told them I would be willing to help only if they could offer me a higher salary than what my current employers were paying me, which I knew they couldn't because they literally needed me to save them from going bankrupt, so there was no way they could pay me anything at all. My dad looked taken aback and stated the obvious, that they couldn't pay me, and neither had they expected me to ask for any money since I was his son and I owed this to my family. But I told him I made a decent amount of money where I work now, and I led my life the way I wanted to. It seemed unfair for them to expect that I'd give up the comfort of my current life just to bail them out of trouble when they hadn't been in touch with me and neither had they cared enough to check up on how I was doing for the last 8 years. If I hadn't expected them to reach out to me and take care of me in my times of trouble, then neither should they. And I believe I was being very fair to them. I made it very clear that my only condition to come back was that they should pay me twice the amount I was making right now. I thought they would argue with me or try to force me to come back, but instead, my father just totally broke down in front of me. I think this was the first time I ever really saw him cry. Even at my mother's funeral, he was sad, but he didn't let himself break down the way he did the other day. He's a really stoic man in general and has been that way my entire life, so this made me feel like absolute crap. My stepbrother didn't help the situation either. He told me they had expected better from me and believed I would step up and be a good son, but I had let them down. They left after that, and my stepbrother told me they'd still be willing to have me back, but what I said wasn't cool, and I owed my dad an apology for being so disrespectful and selfish. My dad didn't say anything else after he'd wiped his tears and left without a goodbye. It's been 2 days since then, and I don't know what to do about the situation I'm in. I wasn't actively trying to humiliate them or insult my dad, but now I don't know. I don't feel too good about what I did, and this is definitely not as satisfying as I'd expected to feel. I just feel so horrible about what I said. To be honest, it's mostly because my dad started crying, and I think I owe my dad an apology because my intention was to get back at him for what he did, but I ended up really hurting his feelings. I need some advice because I have no idea what to feel or what to think right now. Ida for demanding that my dad pay me twice the amount I earn right now if they want me to take over the business again, knowing that he can't afford it. My dad kicked me out of the family business and let his stepson take over. Now, 8 years later, they're at my doorstep, begging me to take over again because they're on the verge of bankruptcy. I agreed to help, but only on one condition that. Update 1. Hello. It's been a week since my dad visited me, and after a lot of thought, I decided not to apologize to him or reach out again. I read the comments on my post and the messages people sent me, and most people think I don't owe him an apology. I feel the same way now since I thought about it and realized I was just being too emotional because my dad ended up crying. A few days after that, I thought about the 8 years I spent without my dad and the amount of tears I'd cried during that time because I literally felt like I had nobody. My mom was gone, she passed away after a massive heart attack, and my dad preferred his new family, new wife and son, over me. A few of my friends did keep me company and boost my morale, but even they had their own struggles and hardships, so it's not like they could provide the same emotional support that my family could have. I'm glad I'm still in touch with some of them, though, because they really did help me to the best of their abilities. But still, I could always feel the void that my parents left. Thinking about all of that really put my dad's tears into perspective and made me realize how unfair it all was. My stepbrother even had the guts to tell me I needed to step up and help and also apologize after what they put me through. None of them fought to reach out to me and get me to come back even once after I'd left. None of them bothered to find out whether I was even alive or not until it was they who needed my help, and then they came running to me, expecting me to just help them without as much as an apology. Truth be told, I might have even considered helping them out and taking over their failing business had they at least acknowledged their mistake and apologized for it. They just needed to admit that they'd messed up, and I probably would have offered to help them out myself, they wouldn't even have had to ask. Truth be told, I might have even considered helping them out and taking over their failing business had they at least acknowledged their mistake and apologized for it. They just needed to admit that they had messed up, and then I probably would have offered to help them out myself, they wouldn't even have had to ask. I'm not a very cold person, I like to think of myself as a forgiving human being. But even I can't forgive someone who's not even sorry, and they pissed me off by playing the family card. Why was that not something they considered when they were kicking me out of the business and their home? They didn't stop to think that I was a part of this family and that maybe I deserved to be part of the business that I had helped run for a couple of years. I had more experience than my stepbrother, and no college degree can buy you that, that's for sure. If it hadn't been for my stepbrother's dad, he probably wouldn't even have been able to attend that college, and we would have been on the same boat then. My stepmom's last husband, my stepbrother's biological dad, is a relatively rich guy and could afford to send him to a better college than the one I went to. And for my dad to use that against me back then was absolutely unfair. He could have sent me to a better college, but he chose not to because the one I went to would teach me all I needed to learn anyway, and he didn't want to waste money on more tuition when eventually I'd just be taking over the family business. He was the one who made the decision for me and then used it against me when it was convenient for him, which is what hurt me the most. So no, I don't believe that I owe him an apology anymore, and if they contact me again, then I'll tell them once and for all that I'm not interested in coming back. I've built a life for myself far away from them now, and that's the one I'm going to choose. Update 2. My stepbrother texted me today to ask if I had given any thought to their offer. I told him I wasn't coming back, so thanks, but no thanks. I had already blocked them all a few years after I left, but I hadn't changed my number since then, so they knew how to find me if they wanted to. My stepbrother had probably changed his number, which is how he had been able to text me. He wasn't happy with my response and decided to call me several times, but since I was at work, I wasn't able to respond. This happened in the morning, and once I was done with work, I decided to block his new number as well. On my way back home, I noticed my dad's car parked right outside my house. I was really annoyed to see that, and when I was about to do something about it, I heard my stepbrother call out to me. But I pretended not to hear him and went inside as fast as I could, then slammed the door shut. I was in no mood to deal with him after work, so even when I heard him knocking on the door and demanding that I let him in, I told him I wasn't interested in talking and that he needed to leave right away if he didn't want me to call the police to escort him out. He started accusing me of being selfish and said I was being cruel on purpose just because Dad had chosen to let him take over almost a decade ago, and now I was bitter and vengeful, which is why I was refusing to help them. I didn't even try to justify myself and agreed, then asked him to leave again, or else I really would report him. That's when he finally left after letting out a string of expletives against me, as if that would make me feel bad. I'm thinking about tightening the security around my place because I don't want them to mess with me anymore, but I absolutely can't let them mess with Aussie. My dad kicked me out of the family business and let his stepson take over. Now, 8 years later, they're at my doorstep, begging me to take over again because they're on the verge of bankruptcy. I agreed to help, but only on one condition that. Update 3. Okay, so I had to take a day off work today because of what happened yesterday and everything I got to know about my family. All I can say is that my dad is seriously messed up, and I have no idea why he would confess the things he did. I received an email from my dad last night, which I wasn't expecting at all. The last time I'd heard from them was when my stepbrother had shown up at my place almost 2 weeks ago. Since then, they hadn't texted or called me anymore, so I'd assumed they'd given up trying to get me back. I was really busy with work, so I had sort of forgotten about the whole thing. His email was really long, so I thought I'd read it later, but he sent another email within seconds, telling me I needed to read the first one as soon as possible if I wanted to know the truth about why he had made my stepbrother his successor and not me. That piqued my interest, so I ended up reading that email last night, and I honestly don't know what to make of it. He told me that he hadn't met my stepmom after my mother's death like he initially told me. In fact, he had known her for a long time, and they had been together for several years before my mom passed away, meaning he had been cheating on my mom for a long time. My stepmom divorced her husband a year after my mom's death, and eventually, my dad told me about their relationship and made it seem like they'd been together for just a short while. I've got to admit they hit it really well. He told me that my stepbrother had known about their extramarital affair and had kept it a secret for them for the longest time. But once he graduated from college, he told my dad and his stepmom that he wanted to take over my dad's business. My dad had suggested that he and I partner up and run it together, but my stepbrother wasn't okay with that and wanted to be the only boss. My dad tried to negotiate with my stepbrother to the best of his abilities because of the promise he had made to me earlier, but my stepbrother wasn't willing to listen. Eventually, he brought out the big guns and told my dad and his stepmom that they could either make him the successor who would inherit the lucrative business, or he'd tell his dad about his mother's affair, which would put an end to the alimony payments. His dad was the head of surgery at a hospital, and that was not a position he could inherit. He'd have to study and work to get there. My stepbrother preferred my dad's business, which was something he could get through persuasion and blackmail. So, my dad had no choice but to let him take over the business because my stepmom couldn't give up the alimony. My stepmom believed the alimony payments would help in the future in case they ever needed money. But now, when they really did need money to fund their business and save it from sinking, she was refusing to lend a helping hand and was holding on to all the wealth she'd accumulated over the years. This is why my dad had been forced to mortgage my mother's jewelry. The woman was so damn selfish that even after everything my dad had done for her and her son, she was refusing to help them because she didn't think it was worth it to save an already failing business. She didn't want to lose her money, even though her own son had asked her to step in. She didn't care about anyone but herself, not even her own son, and my dad was just realizing it now. Although, I can't say I feel bad for any of them because all of them are just horrible, horrible people. And I'm really relieved now that I left this toxic and selfish family behind. My dad asked me to consider coming back, now that I knew his reasons behind doing what he did. But if anything, he's just hammered the last nail in his own coffin. There's no chance in hell that I'll go back to them now that I know the truth. He's been cheating on my mother, and I think now it's just his bad karma catching up to him. For him to think that I'd actually feel bad for him and come back out of pity is just delusional. I don't know what's going to become of my stepbrother and stepmom, but they're such crappy people that I think they have a really bleak future in store for them too. But yeah, I'm glad that I'm out of there because my dad's last email just made sure that I'll never go back to that family and that I'll stay as far away from their mess as I possibly can. Update 4. Hello everyone. Thanks for checking in on me and for all the sweet comments and messages you guys left for me. I feel like I have a lot of online well-wishers now, so that's nice. I also learned about some of you who are going through similar experiences with your families kicking you out, and all I want to say to you is, hold on, it gets better. Just keep working towards your future and don't give up. My family has left me alone, and since it's been close to a month, I don't think they're going to contact me again. I blocked them all again and haven't bothered to find out what became of them or the business because I'm content with my life now and have no desire to ever think of them again. Now it's just me and Aussie, like it always has been.